This is the Moto Guzzi Norge GT8V. It is it's a touring bike, and I would say that its main competitor would be the BMW RT, which is the boxer engine of their touring bikes. Basically, much of these bikes are similar. It's a 2010, so it's not the most modern, or doesn't compete with the most modern, 2020 bikes as far as all the gadgetries and things like that. But if we're thinking 2010, they're very competitive with the BMW in the same year, same era. ABS brakes, of course, with all your touring bikes. You should have ABS braking. Saddlebags, we've got 3 of them. They're not in the best condition, in fact. If you look at this one, it's missing the reflector for the back, and I'm not sure if the guy did that on purpose just to make it more blacked out looking. Not sure why I'd want to do that, but or if somehow he broke it off. And I can tell from this side bag here, it looks like he probably scratched it up. It's a little bit not as shiny as, say, the other side. So let's take a look at the other side, because that one is a bit shinier. Yes, see how I can see my reflection of that one. Yes. All right. Very good brakes on this thing, and it has a V-twin engine. As I didn't say V-twin. It is a V-twin. It's the quattro valve. And instead of the cylinders coming straight out like the BMW, they are up at more of an angle. So you don't really feel like you're going to, hit them going around corners. You're not going to hit the ones on the BMW going around corners either, but sometimes you might feel that way. I like this because the cylinders are actually in a position where they help block the wind from your legs, and they put some deflectors here so you're not taking on the heat from the cylinders, but the cylinders actually block the wind and rain from your legs, which is kind of nice. Nice part of the fairing anyway. Has its own unique character in that engine. Single-sided swing arm with shaft drive. Center stand and side stand. Bars are in a pretty darn good position for riding. The fully adjustable front suspension. I believe the rear is adjustable, though I'm not sure how you get to it. Probably a little bit more difficult to get to that than it is the front. Probably remove the side cover here. And then the windscreen is also adjustable. That's kind of about it. You've got heated grips. So heated grips, adjustable windscreen. There's no cruise control. That's a 2010, so you're not getting the cruise control. You got adjustable levers. And you've got the bags, and for a riding position, or for your passenger, it is pretty nice with this padded backrest, and the seat conforms to their buttocks so that they can not slide forward into you. I think we need to give it a ride. We'll do a little parking lot routine here. Let's start it up so you can hear what this thing sounds like. One of the things that I found with this bike that is interesting, it shakes at idle speed, or at idle, almost like, say, you think like a Harley Davidson or something, it has that chuggy shaking, the windshield's gonna shake, maybe the bars would shake a little bit, but right off idle, all that shaking's gone. So they're leaving it there just for character. On the BMW, you really don't have that shake, but you have a little bit of vibration, a little more off just idle. So I've got that shake there, a little bit of like vibration, which is kind of unique. As soon as I come off idle, it's just gone. On the BMW, when I give it a little gas like that, the bike shifts. It's gonna do it. It should do it on this bike a little bit. Let's see if we can feel it. Just tiny bit. On the BMW, you could certainly feel it, and it moves from side to side. So let's give this thing a little parking lot routine. We'll go around in some circles, see how it handles in the parking lot. That's important because this may be used for your commuting around town. and it certainly does really well. Any problems whatsoever. Tight turns, no problem. Really actually pretty nice. So I can make really tight turns with this bike, which is great. Feels really natural. Easy at slow speeds, very balanced. And that engine character is not throwing me off balance, which is nice. I think what we'll do is take it out on some twisty roads, and we'll see how it is out cruising in its element. And that is, you know, some touring, you know, sport touring. This is more on the touring bike, if you ask me, than the sport. But we're gonna go out and see how it does out there, and I'll all right, we've come out to more of a windy road to kind of have this bike out in the wine country, kind of where it belongs, you know, out cruising a bit. A couple things I've noticed about the bike. So it's a fuel injected motorcycle, and when you first start it up, they decide how much extra fuel you need to have that thing warm up, and it seems like or less air, however they end up doing it. And it seems to really need to warm up. When this thing's cold, it's a real dog. It just needs to warm up. And most motorcycles, they've kind of got it to where, you know, the bikes will start, they run, they do well enough, and you almost can't tell that it's got like a choke on, like it would be if you had a carbureted version. With this one, you can tell. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when you start this bike up on a cold day, you let it warm up for a while, then everything's normal and natural. But if you start it up and just ride away on a cold day, it's just gonna be a little bit like a dog. Anyway, some other things I've noticed that I really like. I love these gauges. Moto Guzzi has been really good about their classic looking gauges. They keep, you know, these analog looking gauges, and it's just a beautiful thing rather than just having some techno wizardry up there. As far as riding position, really nice riding position. This windscreen does a lot more than you think. I mean, in the low position, I'm gonna go ahead and lower it right now. It lowers really slow. It's just a slow moving windscreen, but for each little bit that you move it up, it really changes the aerodynamics of where you're sitting. A lot more effect than on other bikes, and it could just be the design of that windscreen, the shape of it. So I played with it a little bit just to find the right position, and with this helmet that I've got on now, which is more like a motocross helmet, just because it fits my camera and my microphone a little bit better. I really have to have it in the up position, but with a standard helmet, I have it in a lower position, somewhere about midpoint, and it works best for me. Let's take her for a ride. Has a good sound, and the character of the engine, the power band, I like it. I like it better than I like the BMW RT of the same year. It took BMW till about 2013 to really refine that boxer motor to have the right kind of power for a street bike. And it just gives you a power band that just keeps increasing with power. The older BMWs seem to have power off the low end, but nothing, you know, after that. It just sort of disappeared. This has a good power band. I like it. I like it better than the RT for sure. So that, and I like the way that where the engine cylinders sit. Like I was telling you before, my knees sort of sit behind them. There's a shielding there so I don't get any of the heat. The display is very easy to read. Transmission feels the same as BMW's transmission. Really feel it go into gear. Kind of a positive feeling, but it's a more, what would I call it? I think agricultural. We always use that word agricultural. It's like, you know, big gears clunking in. It does feel that way. Same with the BMW. You get away from that in some of the Japanese bikes where they just, you move the gear shifter up and somehow it magically goes into gear. You almost don't even feel it. This you know it when you put it into gear. Same with the BMW. Very comfortable, easy to push or pull into corners. Nice and smooth. There's really no vibrations coming up through the bars. Pulls really good from low RPM. That was at about 2,500 RPM. It was nice and solid. It's a fun, smooth bike to ride. Sort of forget there's you know, all the bags on it. You don't even see them in the mirrors, and you don't feel like it's bulky at all. I think that's nice because it does not feel bulky. These are good bumps over this bridge here, so I'm always curious, how does the bike do? Does it wallow a bit? It kind of feels like, you know, it's soft suspension, so you feel it move there in but nothing harsh. Go up through the windy road here and see how it handles. Very nice, predictable. Good. Yeah. Now we've adjusted the front suspension a little bit. It was set very soft before and it would dive, so it has some pretty good adjustability into the suspension. It's a quiet ride. The way it turns into corners, it's just real predictable. It just, wherever you lean it, it sort of stays. It's not pushing you back out. It's just right where you want it to go. Excellent for the back roads. One thing I noticed, there's no gear indicator on this motorcycle. Now, I don't really care about the gear indicator, but if you're, you know, it's a note that there's nothing there. You got a clock, you got kind of the basic information, but a gear indicator would be nice. I know a lot of people love to have a gear indicator. So if you're cruising down the freeway and you kind of forget, hey, did I put it in top gear? You can kind of know that. Or if you pull up to a stop sign and don't know if you put it in first, it would tell you. You know, you do have a neutral light to tell you when you put it in neutral. A really nice gas gauge. It looks like something out of a car with that nice gauge there for the gas. I mean, that's a really obvious thing. I like that. A lot of motorcycles, it's sort of hidden. It's an afterthought. This one is definitely part of the gauge cluster there. I'd rather have a nice big gas gauge than a gear indicator. And I'm always curious, the larger bikes, so if I'm coming into a corner and I'm going to put on the brakes into the corner, still handles well. And a lot of bikes will stand up. You know, they have a tendency to put on the brakes, or, you know, you're really not supposed to be putting the brakes on and going into the corner, but it's a safety thing. How is it going to act? You know, if I put the brakes on, does it want to stand up? Because if it does, the tendency is then you're going to go straight. And this seems to hold its line really well. Seat is pretty comfortable. It's really soft. And there's sort of a couple schools of thought on the seats, and I'm only been riding this for about 20 minutes, so I can't really tell you how that's going to feel over time. A lot of people like soft seats and a lot of people like harder seats. I've come accustomed to the harder seats myself, but boy, this does feel comfortable, so you don't want to... You'd have to ride it for a long time to decide whether you like a harder or softer seat. It's comfy though, and I'm betting that's comfortable for the passenger as well. They've got their own seating position back there. They're probably going to lean against the rear luggage rack, which is secured really well. So on this bike, it's got a metal rack that's made out of steel, and it's bolted in with some really large diameter bolts. So I'm not super concerned about somebody leaning against it, where some other bikes it's all plastic. And I tend to want to tell my pillion, hey, you know, don't solely lean against that. I don't want it to come off, you know. So the heated grips, you see the flasher here, if you can see that little blue one. Well, just below that there's another one, and you pull that in, and the little trip number here will switch to say heated grips. I'm going to pull it in, and it shows you what temperature you've got there. So it changes the display, and there's either 1, 2, or 3 levels of heat, and you can cycle through them, and you have to hold it down again to turn them off. And then your trip number comes back up there. The mode button with the right thumb, and that cycles through all the different fuel economy modes, the trip mode, the what did I say? 2 trips, fuel economy, speed or distance till empty, I think, things like that. It's interesting, the angle of the buttons are all perfect for your hands. And I've heard a complaint, one of the reviews I saw, it's like, oh, I can't see as well these buttons because they're angled down a bit. But the problem with them being angled up is that they're not natural where your thumb is. Like right now my thumb is perfectly set up for the button, like the ABS button that I could turn on or off. On the other side, the horn, which is perfect. That's the first thing my thumb would hit if I go to hit something in an emergency. Just up from that, my blinkers, and just up from that, a little bit out of, not quite out of reach, but I've got to actually think about it, the mode button. And that's perfect. So they are angled down a bit, but for your hands, that is absolutely perfect. Good thinking. I think Moto Guzzi does a lot of, they put a lot of thought into their ergonomics, so it's not like that happened by accident. The mirrors are absolutely outstanding. They're perfect. I've got this one adjusted a little too far in, so let me adjust that one out a tiny bit. And they're not huge, but I can see everything behind me. I mean, behind me and beside me. Mirrors are perfect. I can see they've made some little extensions. So instead of mounting them back here, they made some little extensions off the brake master cylinder and the clutch master cylinder, so they sit outboard a little bit, and that just brings them past your shoulders. And so I really don't have my body in view there, just my elbows. That's it, just in the corner of the mirror, and then the rest of it's a perfect view behind me. As far as I'm very upright seating position, of course. With a touring bike, it should be that way. Some are a bit bent over, but this is not. I'm totally flat-footed on this 32-inch inseam. Totally flat-footed. The pegs are higher than some of the touring bikes, but that gives you lots of ground clearance for corners, so it gives you a lot of that, the ability to do sport riding and not worry about grinding pegs, and that's nice. And it's not so tight that, you know, my legs aren't bent out of a comfort zone. Bars are really good reach. I have a lot of room in this cockpit. There are some that are angled a bit too far back. I think it was the K1200. The bars are bent, they have a farther bend back, and they sort of reach back, and it sort of feels like my arms are bent too much on that bike. Whereas this bike, my arms are a lot straighter, and that ends up being more comfortable for me. I like to be spread out a little bit on the bike. When they're back far enough, I feel like I'm always leaning back into my passenger. This way, the worst thing I'm doing is leaning forward a little bit for that if there's any, you know, extended wind at a higher speed. For me, it's a lot more comfortable. I feel like I can move around a bit in the cockpit. Right, I can move forward a little bit, back a little bit if I need to. Got room to move my legs around a little bit. The bike seems really narrow for a touring bike, so the heads aren't sticking way out. The luggage is in closer than the mirrors, so I know that if I'm doing some commuting on this bike, if my mirrors fit, my bike fits. If my handlebars fit, my bike fits. Everything's well contained in that zone, and it makes for a lot more confidence going through traffic if you're filtering traffic. Bike feels real solid. Really nice. So this bike has 9,706 miles on it. Now for 2010, that is nothing. I've put that many miles on in like 2 trips. Well, shoot, less than 2 trips. That's like a trip and a half. So I'm fairly convinced. This may have, I don't, you know, it's always hard to know what the bike was used for. Maybe just a few trips here and there. Could be some commuting, some light commuting. The guy was a supporter of the CHP. How do I know that? There's a license plate frame indicates that. Maybe a retired CHP officer. All right, so where does this bike stack up? If I'm in the market for 2010 touring bike with few miles, oh my gosh, yeah, with that few miles, you're probably just not going to find that. My 2011 BMW had 72,000 miles on it, and that's pretty average. So this with 9,000 miles is still new. I'd say you're still breaking it in. Hey, you haven't even gotten to the first valve check, 24,000 miles or something. They're super easy to do on this bike too, because the heads are sticking out. What else can I tell you guys? Yes, I do a lot of I look at a lot of reviews as well, and so one of the comments was people thought it was difficult to change the oil on this bike. And so the first thing I do when I get bikes in is change the oil. I want to see if there's any sediment in the oil. I want to make sure I know what kind of oil's in it. I always put synthetic oil in all the bikes. And I think confusion might be the right word for people when they're changing the oil, because where the dipstick goes in, it's more like a dipstick from a car, where it has the little thing, you know, you push in and pull up and check the oil. Well, that's the same place you put the oil in, and that little, where the dipstick goes in, that unscrews and comes out, and then you've got a larger hole, larger diameter hole to put your oil in. Otherwise, the hole's pretty small, because it's just made for the dipstick. And I see people have bought little, very small tubes to try to drain the oil into that spot. And I guess I get the confusion there, but maybe a flashlight and you'd have looked at it, you'd see that there's just a hex head on that bolt. It's not tight, so you just unscrew it, and then you've got a big enough hole to change your oil. The oil filter is very easy, very accessible. The drain plug is super easy and super accessible. Yeah, I think very basic oil change, very easy. Just have to remember to pull that little plug out where the dipstick goes in. Well, there's another complaint that I heard of, and I had to look into it, because of course I try to adjust the suspension on all the bikes we get in, and so complaint was that the manual doesn't really tell you how to adjust the suspension, and that's probably true, but the suspension is going to be adjusted for your weight and for your passenger. You know, are you going to have a passenger? Are you going to have luggage? Are you going to, how heavy are you? On a touring bike, there's so many different possibilities. They give you a starting position, and I think it's a good one. You know, it's the adjusters are on top. If you can see here, the adjusters turn in for a stiffer setting and out for a softer setting. So turn them all the way in, and the way we have adjusted this one is 2 turns out from all the way in. The stock setting or the setting that we got this bike, it was about 12 turns out. And 12 turns out, it's really soft. Softer than the back by a long shot. So it's good to always check your suspension. Call somebody that knows what they're doing. Check online. But usually you can tell after you're riding it if the bike's not diving. If it doesn't feel too stiff, you might have it about right. And you may adjust that a little bit. The adjusters are right there, so it makes it a little easier for, you know, if I'm carrying a passenger, I want to stiffen that up a little bit. And go another turn in. It's a pretty good setting where I've got it right now. Works good for 2 up, works good for luggage, and it works good for a single person. Sort of a good mixture there. So let's see, what gear did I have that in? 3rd gear at like 10 miles an hour. And it still pulls pretty good. I did 4th gear. It's pulling through that at 4th gear. Oh my goodness. Anyways, guys, this is a nice bike. Let's take a look at it one more time. I'm going to put it up on the center stand. Pretty easy. My foot underneath it, stand up, and just pull up on the rear there, and it just comes right up. That, my friends, is a 2010 Moto Guzzi Norge GT. Boom. Ba-da-ba-boom.